can give it another minute. I can give a quick intro of myself. So I'm Genna Patton. I work in the EPA's Office of Policy in the Office of Climate Adaptation and Sustainability, which is a new office for the Office of Policy, although the work that we've been doing to help coordinate and integrate climate adaptation into all the work of the national programs and regions has been something that has been occurring, just not with a formal office behind us. And before starting at EPA, came from the Union of Concerned Scientists, where I worked at the Center for Science and Democracy and did a lot of work on mobilizing scientists on science-based decision-making and worked on a range of issues, including PFAS and legacy pollution and cumulative impacts, and worked closely with some environmental justice partners as well. So the work that I'm doing ties in very neatly to the work that I do now at EPA. And Minnie and I recently just got connected because of the other work that I do within the Office of Policy, which is with the Interagency Working Group on Energy Communities. So we have been helping to coordinate some of the work that's happening in regional place-based efforts called rapid response teams that are basically like federal-led groups that connect with partner organizations, businesses, local governments in different regions that have been impacted by coal plant closures or coal mine closures. So that is an effort to make sure we're getting as much federal technical assistance and resources into those communities that help meet their needs as much as possible. And in Region 8, we have a rapid response team in Wyoming, that covers the whole state. We've got Four Corners, which touches Utah and Colorado, and then we're scoping for a rapid response team in Montana. So I've been in touch with folks at MSU, including Julia Haggerty on that as well. So lots of connections, I think, between the work that you're doing and the work that we're doing in our office as well. And then I'm gonna put a link in the chat to the new craft resource that we have developed and give you a little bit of background before Steph jumps on. You all have this link handy. Stephanie will talk a little bit about this, I think, but one of the reasons that we developed this effort to integrate or kind of daylight the ways in which EPA's funding opportunities can fund climate adaptation and resilience projects is out of a internal memo that was issued that with our Deputy Administrator Janet McCabe and OP Associate Administrator Vicky Arroyo, that was a call to EPA to better integrate climate adaptation and resilience into our own financial assistance and given statutory authorities. And so we have developed an internal companion to this public-facing tool that helps financial assistance staff at EPA to basically be more aligned on the language that we're using around climate adaptation and resilience, and also offer basically support and assistance for that staff to integrate, to learn about some of the policy topics around climate adaptation and resilience, and also to integrate it into their notice of funding opportunities or technical assistance that they are standing up as it relates to, it might not be what they would, the programs don't always have like a clear climate adaptation resilience lens, but there are ways that we can talk about it as being a co-benefit of many of the programs that we work on. So we wanted to daylight that for our own internal staff and do a lot of capacity building internally. And then as a companion to that, we created this resource that was public facing that would help technical assistance providers kind of give that same information to potential applicants so that there is that alignment between what we're doing internally and how we're talking about climate adaptation and resilience projects externally. So that's a little bit of the background. Yep, I see a question.
Quick question. Are we recording this?
Oh, here's Stephanie.
Okay, sorry.
It does look recorded.
Oh, yeah. There it is. Sorry. Just wanted to triple check. Thank you.
Hey, Steph.
Hi all.
So we've
Everyone's
done some intros. I gave a little bit of background on Crick, the companion tool to Craft, as like a lead up to why we developed Craft. And I'll pass it over to you. I introduced myself, but maybe Steph, if you want to introduce yourself and go into the presentation, we can go ahead.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you all for bearing with me. I've learned that my computer only wants to restart when I have a webinar that's about to go on. So that seems to be status quo. Won't spend too much time on introductions. I know Barbara might have shared a couple words earlier. But I'm Stephanie Santell. I work with Genna, and we're in the Office of Policy, Office of the Administrator. And so I head up this group that's developed all the things Genna has spoke to you about already today. And we're really excited to interface with you all as kind of the tried and true end users of these tools. And that is what I'll say from the get-go. The game plan for the coming months is to really listen to what the needs are on the ground, wanting to interface with the people that are using this tool so that we can kind of build it out in a way that makes sense, meets existing current needs, staying up to date on the issues and what have you. So really great to be here today. Thank you so much for your time. Just by way of maybe a little bit more context on me, I came to Office of the Administrator 3 years ago and stepped into the space of our EPA's commitment for climate resilient investments, which I'll talk a little bit about. Work on a bunch of other tangential climate policy topics across the agency, and was in the water sector for a very, very long time before coming to Office of Policy. So I've kind of been around the block at EPA. But that's, I think, kind of enough about me here. So let's jump into what we're going to talk about today. I mentioned just a few seconds ago, the creating resilient climate resilient investments commitment wasn't just something that we wanted to do as a subgroup or as a team. It's actually something that is pretty systemic throughout our long-term plans at EPA. So it's in our climate adaptation plan, our adaptation policy, our strategic plan that is current out there. And thinking about two things, really being able to modernize our programs so that we're in fact supporting these considerations and these policy incentives outside of EPA through our programs and what we're doing through program implementation, but certainly also working outside with our partners, thinking about what they need as they're moving this money and converting money into projects on the ground. So wanting to make sure that we're listening to them, we're working with them, and that we're meeting their express needs. And one of the ways that we wanted to do that and operationalizing this commitment through the Resilient Infrastructure Subgroup on Climate was standing up the Climate Resilience and Adaptation Toolbox. So this was one of the ways, as Genna had probably mentioned earlier, that we really got at this issue of, it is one thing to incentivize climate resilient investments. It's another thing to enable them. And so the toolbox was really kind of our first step, what you see online today, of trying to really give technical assistance providers, in particular, the tools that they need to have conversations with folks that are out in community, that are maybe working in nonprofit organizations, that are receiving the funding, that are making moves on the ground, and thinking about the ways that adaptation, resilience, and climate justice can really be inserted and kind of plugged into their investment decisions and the way that they build out and implement their projects over time. So there's a lot of great resources that we're going to run through there. This is kind of like we're going to tell you what we're going to tell you before we tell you kind of slide. So the program overviews that we had are a nice way to look at the financial assistance programs we have at EPA. Yes, those that receive funding from Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act, but also just the regularly appropriated programs that we have. Climate risk tools, thinking about what is out there that we can make very easy to navigate for people and kind of lift up what we think is the best of what's available. Communications materials and meaningful engagement resources. These are something that I'm sure is on everybody's mind in thinking about, particularly with the hurricanes and wildfires and other natural disasters we've seen across the country. Really important to be having conversations about climate risk and what we can do before these types of events occur to make sure that we're protecting our communities and we're certainly protecting their investments. And then things like definitions and policy topics that you'll see really wanting to standardize the conversations that we're having at the federal level. When we talk about certain terms, how are we defining them? And also, how are we thinking about holistically project development, being able to hit on multiple priorities? Genna is going to be able to walk folks through a couple of the use cases, so pertinent to your work as applicants, as people that are out there in community, maybe working with applicants or others on projects. What are the ways in which you can use craft immediately for finding funding if you're thinking about assessing climate risk to your project or project location, and if you're wanting to communicate and engage with project partners potentially, or people that are in the community, making sure that kind of all voices are included and heard. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to go over to the actual tool, just to be mindful of time, walk people through things pretty quickly. So now we're on the homepage for craft, as we call it. And when you come in, you're going to get just a little blurb, what's generally in here, what it's about, and then be able to navigate to featured topics or more information. So we'll go first to these funding program overviews. One of the things that we heard very early on in developing risk and risks products was that it was incredibly difficult for folks to, especially with bill and IRA, navigate the funding programs that are available, the opportunities that are available, and matching those funding opportunities to actual project needs. And also being able to pull from multiple funding opportunities, right? Because we know that often not a single source of funding goes to funding an entire project. We're often looking at multiple. And so we thought about a very low lift way to do that. And so we came up with this idea of just the funding program overviews. They're very pithy, 2 pages, tells you a basic description of that funding program, the types of adaptation and resilience projects that could be considered for funding and eligible, available technical assistance. So, there are programs at EPA like community change grants that offer technical assistance. There's also a lot of TA providers that we work with specific programs that can offer that additional support, could be for pre-application or post-application. And then wanting to daylight any important connections that we have to other funding opportunities, whether they be at EPA, another federal agency, or something completely outside of federal government. So you can navigate down, check out these overviews. They're organized by environmental media. And also funding status, if they're open, they're closed, they're archived, as in, they were one time kind of shot in the arm from bill and IRA. And then additional resources and tools. So we kind of just don't leave you hanging with those. We wanted to give a little bit more information and lift up some of the guides and resources that the White House has developed, that we have at EPA for technical assistance, or if you're really new to the grant space at EPA, just basic information that's really good to go to on how you manage federal grants. That's super helpful. Another great area that we have developed as part of CRAFT, and again, thinking really about the applicants and the recipients of funds, is centering climate risk in funding and financing decisions. And so what the group has thought about is, it doesn't matter if a project is maybe primarily for water or land or chemical safety. If you're not thinking about climate risk as part of that project or part of that investment, you may not, see or realize the overall benefits of that project over its anticipated lifespan. And so centering climate risk, being able to encourage people to think about climate risk before they apply for funding, and also as they're implementing that project over time, is pretty important. So we did a couple things here. We developed a worksheet for assessing your project's climate risk. This can absolutely be used by a TA provider that is sitting down with an applicant or recipient, or applicants and recipients. Others coming to the site can absolutely use that for their benefit. And I will let Genna run through this and open it up with you all. And then we developed this climate risk assessment resources table. So again, really not meant to be overwhelming, just meant to lift up the tools that we have in the federal space that we think are particularly helpful if you just want to understand climate impacts, if you want to do some kind of hazard screening or basic risk assessment, if you're just looking to identify solutions. We broke the tools down into that category. And then of course, there's always that question of, does this tool actually consider forward-looking climate projections? And if you want to absolutely make sure that's in there, yes or no. And so this is the way that they're organized, and you can filter from above and get exactly what you need. So you're not getting an overwhelming number of tools. You might just be getting as a return or output, 3 to 5 that you're looking for that can help you along the way in your project development. We defined those tool categories. So if folks are like, what does that mean? If you click on the key above here, it'll just give you a jump down right here to explain what they are. And then we wanted to make sure climate justice was also highlighted as a through line in all of our work, being able to lift that up as a priority. And so giving people, like you see here, basic understanding of what is EJ Screen versus CGEST, and what if I use one versus the other, what's the type of output and information I'm going to get for my project. Another very central area for us, I mentioned earlier, was communications materials and meaningful engagement support. So this is definitely a good place for technical assistance provider to go. That includes absolutely what state government is doing, and also on a local level. I'm sure everybody can find some good use for these to help, start and continue the conversation about adaptation and resilience and climate justice. So we wanted to offer a couple of things, and this was really to help provide folks with a consistent set of messaging that would mirror the ways in which EPA's funding and financing programs are talking about these terms or talking about these initiatives. And you're seeing that more and more in the funding opportunities and requests that are coming with getting those funding opportunities. So we broke things down into, as appropriate, into these topics. Just letting people know that generally you'll find a suite of materials here, and providing infographics, outreach materials, and eventually we'll be doing videos, so that there is a very nice package people can work with if you're sitting down, you're having a meeting, if you're with a client, if you are posting on social media. There's multiple forms of media for that topic that you can kind of use to continue the conversation with your constituents or those that you work with in the community. So you can see here, assessing your project's climate risk, building community resilience to climate change. These are great. I will also let Genna pop these up too. And we just added this sample social media packet. So this is pretty cool. It covers everything. Lots of different policy topics that we have that you can see here, from just learning about climate resilience and adaptation to nature-based solutions, resilient built environment, meaningful engagement, etc. You can just pluck these and throw them up on Facebook, X, Instagram, whatever is beneficial to you. And then last but not least, is meaningful engagement support. So meaningful engagement, again, really important for thinking about project partners, project governance, continuing the conversation and bringing in community members, particularly those that are most vulnerable, underserved, et cetera, into your project. And so we wanted to pick a couple of helpful resources, particularly EPA's meaningful engagement policy, which just came out a couple of weeks ago, our latest version, and also offer tools like Equitable Resilience Builder that will take a community through an entire stepwise process to do resilience planning with a focus and a centralness on equity. So that's a really good one. And we'll be building out this page with some tribal specific resources in the very near future, and we'll keep this group plugged into that. But basic information on tribal coordination and consultation from a federal perspective too. Before I turn it over, I will just mention one more thing that could be really helpful to this group. Key definitions, great. Additional climate topics, I think this piece is a little bit more appropriate for thinking about the ways in which you're building a project, but you're hitting on multiple local priorities at once. And so we wanted to make sure that, again, we're encouraging this holistic view of developing what would be a climate resilient project. And that includes environmental justice, equity, nature-based solutions, thinking about, does my project or is my project affected by federal flood risk management standard and those requirements? How do I think about a resilient built environment, from the construction materials to the technology that I might be putting in my building? And so we were giving folks like really bite-sized descriptions of what's going on in the federal space, and then pointing you out to EPA resources and then other federal resources that are particularly helpful. And you can see this is, again, not overwhelming, just enough text that gets you to know what you need to know, and then point you out to a couple of things that will be helpful as you're crafting that application or you're thinking about facilitating the development of that project after the fact. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop. And I am going to turn it over to Genna to take us through some use cases and then show you a little bit more, like, layer deeper on what some of our content looks like.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, so now you've seen the layout of Craft, and you know all of the different pieces that are within it, but how might you as a technical assistance provider get into this tool and start using it in support of applicants or recipients of EPA awards? So let's start with funding program overviews. I think there's a couple ways that you could end up on this page and end up using it with potential applicants. So one of the first things that you might be having a conversation with a potential applicant about is someone has a clear idea of the opportunity that they are interested in applying for. So you would come onto this funding program page and say that particular grant opportunity is community change grants, and you are working with them on understanding what are the climate adaptation and resilience projects that could be funded, in addition to, as we know, like one of the main thrusts of IRA is emissions reductions. But where is that climate resilience and adaptation angle? So I think coming in here, going to the Environmental and Climate Justice Community Change Grants program page and scrolling through here would give you a good sense of those eligible projects that have a resilience and adaptation angle. that the potential applicant could think about as they are designing their application. The nice thing about the community change grants is there are wide-ranging types of projects that really do include resilience as part of them. So it's a good example of this. But the other thing that you can come in here and see, as Stephanie described, is there's eligible projects, there's backgrounds on the funding program, and then there's also the associated and available technical assistance with those programs. So community change grants did have a technical assistance program as part of it. And then connections to other EPA, federal, or non-governmental efforts in case there are other related grant programs, or perhaps something that you could use to like in support of your application, like the TIC tax, which all of you know much about. So that's one example of a potential applicant who sort of knows the opportunity they're going after. The other way you might come onto this page is, as Stephanie mentioned, is if you're thinking about a potential project, maybe around a certain media, but you don't know exactly which of EPA's programs could offer the types of resources that you would need. So if maybe you're working with a tribal community, a tribe in your region who is really focused on funding to replace aging water infrastructure or to enhance the resilience of their water infrastructure. You might take a look at maybe you'll open up all of the water-related programs here. You might take a look at Clean Water State Revolving Fund to see, maybe you're not aware of all of the ways in which this particular loan program can provide financing for water infrastructure with a resilience frame. So in here, you can look at all of the types of projects that are funded by the Clean Water SRF program. And then you can go down and also look into, there's a lot. So if you're not aware of that, take a look at the Clean Water and Drinking Water SRFs, because there's some really great opportunities there. And then you can also scroll down and take a look at some of the associated technical assistance that we have from Water TA, Water Technical Assistance, and connections to other EPA and federal or non-governmental efforts. And I think, opening up these different opportunities with potential applicants, you can really start to narrow down maybe a couple of the programs or opportunities that might be a good fit for them, and start to work on what an application or what those initial conversations with the Water TA program, for example, could start to look like. So that's another way in which you would use that funding programs page. I think another along with the funding program overviews, you might take a look at and Stephanie showed off the definitions page if you're interested in really doing that educational component with potential applicants as well, really understanding what all the terms mean, what EPA is even talking about when we're saying climate adaptation and resilience. You can get down to the basics, or you can start drilling into some of the more complex terms related to particular projects on this page, and everyone can get on the same page, so to speak, on the different terms that we use in the federal landscape. So just thinking about that as you're looking at the funding program overviews as well. The next use case that we can talk about is the climate risk assessment resources. So assessing a project's climate risk. Stephanie queued me up on this one. So we developed this assessing your project's climate risk worksheet, which technical assistance providers can use to sit down with potential applicants and basically help them conduct a basic assessment of climate risk to a project of interest. It walks users through a simple climate hazard screening. It helps them think through and analyze the hazards relevant to a geographic or project area of interest. It also helps them consider the risk tolerance and lifetime of their project. There's a lot of really good prompts and questions within this worksheet that can help draw out some really useful information on climate hazard that can then feed into the development of a project, and can help users put all of it together to assess the overall climate risk of a particular project. So this is a really, hopefully, potentially useful resource for all of you in the conversations that you're having, and can be used for pre-application support, and potentially in the once a grant has been awarded, in the work plan development as well, and understanding, okay, now we have this award, and how are we going to implement the different pieces of our project. Let's take another look and see what the risks are to the different pieces of infrastructure we're proposing, for example. So wanted to highlight that worksheet. The other tool on this page is, Stephanie went through this a little bit, is the Climate Risk Assessment Resources table. This can be helpful, I think, in having some initial conversations with potential applicants, in thinking about, if you're working with a particular community and they are interested in developing a project, or maybe even just understanding siting of a project, and they might want to do an initial climate hazard screening, and they're really interested maybe in your region on wildfire risk, for example. You can just kind of click on the wildfire climate hazard screening and toggle around it. Maybe you want projections to be included as a part of that. And then that will help narrow the from the many different federal tools that we know are out there, to understand, okay, maybe let's use camera to really understand what the impacts of wildfire are on our region. We can also drill down with camera on EJ mapping or tribal area mapping, and use different layers if that's of interest to you and your project as well. So it's just, I think, a good way to kind of just start those conversations, narrow down the tools. We know there are many federal tools, and some of what we wanted to do is develop a sort of fit for purpose tool of tools on this particular website, to help applicants just narrow down and really begin the process of their climate hazard assessments. The third use case we can walk through is really just communicating about climate adaptation and resilience projects. So as Stephanie said, we have created several materials here for technical assistance providers to use. We can take a look at the infographics that we created. There's 3 of them, and they all are related, so they can be used together, they can be used separately, but no matter what, they are aligned in the way that they're communicating about climate projects and climate investments. So the first one I think we can pull up is this really an infographic to show the different steps of a climate investment and climate adaptation investment, and why it's important to make sure we're considering climate risk and engaging the public in every step of the different climate adaptation process. So we've got, you'll see the same kind of process in this one, and the meaningful engagement infographic, but we have engaging the public, assessing climate impacts. If you scroll down, planning, very important step for understanding what the options are, and then applying for funding, and then implementing your project and evaluating the success of that project, and then iterating and continue. The cycle continues for next round, because we know we're never done with just one project or investment in a community. And so at the very bottom of this infographic, we also have a few examples of different climate adaptation solutions and benefits, especially like showing holistic benefits that climate adaptation projects can provide for communities. So that's an infographic that you guys can, technical assistance providers can take and use in the conversations and events that you're having. You can share on social media, and you can use the social media package that we have up on the craft website as well to do that. And then Steph, if we go back to the next infographic, which is how to assess your project's climate risk. This is really drilling down on basic steps for conducting a climate risk assessment. It basically takes the same information that's in that worksheet, but makes it more visually appealing for people to help if you're having conversations with people and helping them understand why it's so important to examine and identify climate risks ahead of a project. This is a good resource to use with them. And then the third infographic that we have available is the meaningful engagement infographic. And this one describes how important it is to build meaningful engagement into the process every step of the way in your climate adaptation investment. So you'll see we took the same steps from the initial infographic we showed you and talked about the ways in which it's really important that a project integrates meaningful engagement throughout in order to ensure an investment is driven by the community, it really meets a community's needs, and that trust is built along the way, that there are different paths for community engagement throughout the process, throughout its life cycle, including advisory groups to make sure that to hold project participants accountable for delivering the community benefits that were described at this very start of the project and in the project plan. So that's another resource that can be used in having those conversations about, okay, why are we thinking about climate risk? Why are we thinking about meaningful engagement as we're describing and creating our application for a climate project? And you'll see that all of the ideas that have gone into each of these infographics are very much aligned with the way that EPA's investments and NOFOs are describing these very same issues. And for example, this meaningful engagement infographic is very much aligned with the recently released meaningful engagement policy that EPA issued earlier. Oh, I was going to say this month, but it's now October, so it's not September anymore. It was last month. So those are the three infographics, and you take a look, you can share them and use them as much as you'd like. We're also thinking about other infographics or other types of resources that would be of interest for people for communications materials. So think about that as you're coming up with questions for us. And then, as Stephanie mentioned, we have a craft handout that is a quick one-pager with a QR code that you can use at events, engagements to get people to know what craft is, to promote the use of the resource. And oh, it's not a QR code, sorry, it's a hyperlink. And then the other resource that we have on this page is the social media packet that Stephanie showed, which has a whole bunch of sample language that can be used across social media platforms to describe the way in which you could use craft for your projects, and also just generally educate about climate adaptation and resilience investments and the importance of different aspects like assessing climate risk and incorporating meaningful engagement throughout the process. I will stop there. I think those are the three ways that you can use this tool, although I'm sure there are many others that people will come up with as now that this is live. And we'd love to learn more about how you think you might use it, or ways that you are already using it with your clients. So please keep us posted on that as well.
Thanks to both of you. Very helpful. I wrote about 10 different bullet points that I need to go in and dig deeper on. So thanks again for taking the time. We do have a few minutes for questions. If you have questions, you can pop them in the chat. And while you do that, while I give you a few minutes, I just wanted to remind everybody that MapTech, the Mountains and Plains Thriving Communities Collaborative, we hold these webinars every other Wednesday. So, you can keep that on your calendar. We are Region 8's TICTAC. And so we do serve all of Region 8, including the 28 federally recognized tribes. So we are actively taking technical assistance requests. So yes, contact us. We have an intake form on our website. It's pretty easy to put your information in there and submit that, and someone will contact you within a couple days. So just wanted to let everybody know that that's that.
I have a question.
Sure, go for it, Ben.
Great. Well, thank you both. This has been super helpful. Our team has slowly been digging into craft, but this is just like exactly what we needed to actually start knowing where to go within the toolbox. Just for my team, I think it would be helpful, like when you guys were developing craft, who were the TA providers you had in mind who would be most like this would be most useful to? Like what were some of the prototypes or examples of TA providers you guys were thinking was your target audience for this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we didn't, just to provide reassurance from the get-go, so we didn't develop craft without talking to folks around the agency and even being out at meetings with state, local partners, NGOs, others that we were hearing, when bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act were very much a thing, and people were going for funding, hearing very early on and having our ear to the ground of what the initial obstacles were or like challenges that people were running into, whether that be related to capacity or kind of navigating the landscape of what's out there, et cetera. And so we took all of that back to our group under advisement, had a lot of conversations about how do we knock down some of these barriers and how do we prioritize in kind of like an initial version of this tool, the most important things that were rising to the top from all these conversations that we were either a part of or that we were having internally, because at that rate, nothing was public. And so we couldn't really go out and kind of collect that information in a more end user engagement type way, which is where we're going. And so I think we were thinking a lot about who we were funding, particularly for technical assistance support, like the Tic Tacs, absolutely was like #1 on our list. And then water TA, there's the environmental finance centers. We also have a lot of partnership programs at EPA that are on the ground or that are geographically based, like the National Estuary programs and the geographic programs that are very much so a TA provider in their watershed region. And there's a myriad of other organizations that EPA has agreements with that act as kind of a technical assistance provider to that particular program. And so I think all of that fed into this, but it was, I think, maintaining also a good scope of what craft was going to be about. And so making this about the technical assistance provider that's sitting down and really having those conversations pre-application and post-application in the funding space was really important. So like to prevent this from becoming something that is like everything in the kitchen sink. And that's, a huge role that you all are playing. Like, how do you really facilitate those conversations with communities that are coming in? Maybe they've never applied to a federal grant before. Maybe they're thinking about adaptation and resilience for the first time ever, and there's requirements in that grant that they have to do a risk assessment or they have to provide some kind of narrative in their work plan about how they're going to continuously address climate risks or hazards. Like those are real requirements that exist now, right? So we wanted to lower that activation barrier for you all and for people that were coming in as the applicants that really wanted to do this work.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I can see with so many of these grants, they require really explicit community engagement framework. So I think even the meaningful engagement resources you guys have here would be helpful for our end users actually. So I think that's what we're, as a Tic Tac, we're always trying to we're kind of the mediators between all these participants, and, we're providing some TA, but we're also looking for TA providers who can provide like that real technical assistance on some of these other parts of the grants. And so I see this as like a fairly good overview for us. So thanks for that.
Yeah,
I'll
you're
stop
welcome.
there.
And if there's anything, Jenna was teeing this up earlier, if there's anything that you didn't see in here that you were really hoping for or excited about, or there is something that is existing here that you think is going to be particularly helpful to your work, that would be great to know. And of course, if you have suggestions for what could be added in the future, how this could be even amplified with the right partners, we're all ears. Genna, anything else from your end on the meaningful engagement piece? As Genna is our co-lead for the climate justice and equity. So she is very much so leading up in the meaningful engagement space and the equity space.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to hear. We heard from a different TA provider that they had sent, I think, a potential applicant or someone who was working on their application to the meaningful engagement resources support page, just to give them kind of like a start of learning about. I mean, that the page doesn't include, there's 4 or 5 different resources. Many of, I think all of them they're EPA. And the EPA meaningful engagement policy, there's a lot of really important fundamental internal guidance in there, some of which may be applicable to maybe more of the like local state government efforts, and maybe not as much to a nonprofit that's looking to do some engagements. So if there are additional types of resources that you think that about, or that you think would be helpful to include there, maybe you'll hear about it later as you continue to do this work, let us know. So we're happy to add some more materials onto this page as well. But Stephanie did highlight the equitable resilience builder, and I would encourage all of you to take a look. If you haven't heard of that resource, to take a look, dive into it. It requires like a download of an application. But within it, there's like a whole bunch of example activities and worksheets that would be, I think, really useful for the communities you're working with to do some like really important planning work around resilience and equity. So take a look at that one in particular if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. And Pam had just dropped in the chat a note about the assessment tools being helpful. Thank you. That's great to hear. Yeah, information about nature-based solutions in arid, dry landscapes. Absolutely. So there are some programs like the Green Infrastructure Program at EPA where we said, oh, they have a great infographic, we're just going to cross-link here. And so that's why we didn't develop that content. We are deciding strategically what to pull in for content that makes sense, again, for the scope of craft. Green Infrastructure Federal Collaborative, if you go on going back over to my browser, additional climate topics tab to nature-based solutions. So the Green Infrastructure Federal Collaborative that EPA leads up is a great resource to go to. They have far, far, far more resources that get a little bit more on the technical side of implementation of those projects. So I would definitely encourage you to check that out. We've got the web portal. There's a webcast series that they put on a regular basis where they pull in great folks from the interagency or from other organizations outside of government to come on there and talk about their work. Could be NGOs or academia. They also have states come on. So this is a great place to go to kind of get that layer deeper on nature-based solutions. Ben, go ahead.
This made me think, one thing is that a lot of the groups and communities that we're working with really do have like limited capacity and very much early and they're thinking, what is resilience? What are projects like this could look like? So an infographic that could be really helpful is like a roadmap from how a group could like end goal. If this end goal is like a grant out here, what's the actual roadmap to get there? Because that's what a lot of our groups are always asking us for, is like, how do we actually, what are the steps we need to start with to be able to even, I mean, sometimes federal grants are really long down the road. They're not even close to those right now. So I think like a roadmap infographic could be really helpful for these types of grants.
I'm smirking because we've actually talked about that in recent past. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that would be really helpful because there's a lot, and I always tend to stress this, there's a lot that goes on in the pre-application phase, in the pre-development phase that I think often gets lost in the shuffle. And so having those conversations, bringing the right people in, being able to just like ideate what you want to do and prioritize is so important to being more targeted and strategic about finding that funding opportunity. So I think that's a great recommendation. Any other questions, thoughts, feedback? And if you think of anything after the fact, there is I will admit, and this is kind of a feature of our Drupal platform, but there is a contact us link at the bottom of every page. And so if you do click on this, it will go to this little form here. This will come right to Genna and I, actually. So we will see it, we will get it, we will hear you. If you think of anything after the fact, just shoot us a note. And then you have our contact information directly too.
Hey, Barb, we can't hear you.
Oh, you can't, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I was just saying I look through the lens of, a community being rural, because that's predominantly the technical assistance requests that I've had come in and how remote they are. And so I plan to visit the meaningful engagement piece and see if that can be of help to some of these low capacity, really small communities that have good ideas.
And that, like, if we didn't drive this home enough earlier, that really is the intended beneficiary of craft, right? Those communities that are smaller, that are underserved, that are just getting started. These are resources to really kick off these types of conversations and get people's creative juices flowing, right? They're not the super technical pieces of information that EPA already has up on its website. Like, we want to get people's feet wet, get them feeling comfortable about what's possible. And so that's really kind of the essence of this. So yeah, and that's exactly why a lot of the content that we've created that's gone into here, Barbara, for example, if you're going out into a community and maybe they don't have like a good internet access or what have you, you can print off a lot of those resources so that they can be at the table with you when you're having that conversation.
That can go a long way in many instances.
Yes, for sure.
Well, wonderful. This has been so helpful. So yes, I have a couple check marks on my to-do list. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and this is recorded, so we'll be able to make this available for future reference as well. So feel free to get a hold of us anytime as well, and you will probably hear from us. So thanks again.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for Genna for the connection here. Genna's been an amazing partner in crime on this, so appreciate everything she's done and obviously bringing all of us together today.
Thank you. Okay, well, you got a couple minutes left of your day, so thanks again, and have a good day, everybody.
You too. Thanks all.
Thank you,
Bye.
Genna. Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.